Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy Thursday, and welcome to another live event today on YouTube. I'm Risa Morimoto, your host, and you're watching Modern Aging, where we chat about innovative and holistic ways to optimize our health and well-being as we age. Today, it's a super important topic, and if you're here, you've been thinking about money like I've been thinking about money, and it's been a super stressful time. I've never kind of experienced. I'm in production, so, as we who are in television production, no TV is happening right now. So I collected unemployment for the very first time in my life. And so I had a quick chat with Manisha Thakor, who is our guest today. She's a financial advisor and the founder of MoneyZen.com. I think you guys are going to have amazing takeaways from this talk today. I'm going to bring her on right now. Please make sure you ask your questions because this is your shot. Manisha, thank you so much. How are you?
Risa, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on.
No, I'm super excited to talk to you. This is a super stressful yet very important topic, and I think if we have some takeaways and some planning that we can do in the next half hour, 45 minutes, that can kind of ease people's anxieties and fears over what's going on, I think we can call it a day and go and have a nice glass of wine that you will deserve. So tell me, if you can just give me a little bit of background in terms of your background in finance, how you came to it, and what you've been doing with, how MoneyZen.com came about.
Sure. So I am shocked that I'm saying this, but I am turning 50 in August. And so I have been working in finance for 25 years now. Yep, 25 years. And I did my undergrad at Wellesley, and I headed into investment banking after that. And then I did my MBA at Harvard Business School and moved into institutional and then ultimately individual wealth management. So I have been swimming in the financial seas for quite some time. And MoneyZen, I love this word, side gig. Back when I was in school, that didn't exist. So I'm glad that I feel very hipster when I use that phrase, but I have a side gig, and it's running MoneyZen, which is a financial education consultancy through which I teach, I write, I do keynote speaking and corporate consulting around financial well-being.
And that's how you came into my sphere, actually, because I heard one of your talks.
That's right. I am a guest lecturer for the Institute of, or guest faculty for the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. Risa, that brings up a really good point, which is just how ubiquitous the issues with finance are. What the founder of the Institute of Integrative Nutrition found was that his students were struggling because either they themselves were having financial issues, or even more common, many of the clients they were working with were having nutritional issues because they were having money stress. So it's everywhere. And that's really the first message I want people to hear, is that it crosses all ages, genders, income, and net worth levels, the stress.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now that we're in the era of COVID, I think we're all looking at money differently right now.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you have any sense in terms of what you've been seeing out there. And is there specific places that we should kind of be focusing on?
Well, I think the one thing is there is a columnist at the New York Times, the sketch guy, Carl Richards, and his personal finance column is my favorite. His philosophy is that any financial concept worth paying attention to should be able to be explained on a cocktail napkin with a Sharpie. And one of his iconic drawings, to get to your question, is the intersection of two circles. And in one circle it says what matters, and the other circle says what you can control. And the intersection between what matters and what you can control is what you should focus on. And in this time of COVID, it feels like so much matters, but we can control so little of it. So when it comes to your money, what can you focus on? And the first and most obvious is our spending. We can't always control our income, but we can control our spending. And so that's one area that I will speak more about. I have several ideas there that can be, I think, actually even fun to implement. And
that's the problem, though, is that it is fun for a lot of people to spend. That's probably part of the issue, right?
No, but it's actually the spending reset ideas that I have found people engaging in are actually, and I'm not kidding, are actually fun. It's like Good. Marie Kondoing your finances.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so actually, why don't I stop there? Because that actually, let's dive into that a little deeper, because for most of us, that's the number one stressor. Are we spending too much? Do we have enough to spend? And, there's lots of boring tactics that I could give you about tracking cash flow. But the one that I find most useful and fun right now is to go back and pull up a credit card statement from pre-COVID and just look through it. Or if you're using a couple credit cards, print off each of them, look through the charges you've made, and highlight on those credit card statements anything you spent money on that didn't bring you joy. And that is a great place to start finding areas that when things open up post-COVID that you can eliminate from your ongoing spending and eliminate no joy from your life because it wasn't making you happy to begin with. And I find that people, and you can also do it with your bank statement if you're more of a check writing person. And I find that the areas people hit on are wide ranging. It could be, I hate driving my, high school senior who's the last one in the nest back and forth to out-of-state sports games, and my senior is sick and tired of his or her sport. To why are we paying all of this mortgage when no one's left in the nest but the two of us? And so people sometimes find small things to cut out, and sometimes they find huge things, like huge life changes to make. But doing the spending reset based on what is bringing you or isn't bringing you joy, I have found has been one of the most empowering things that people tell me they've been doing. And just like, Marie Kondo wouldn't encourage you to attack there's an order in which you attack things. When it comes to dealing with financial uncertainty, this is a great first step because it makes you feel like you have something that is in your control and not taking away any happiness.
That's awesome. I feel like I'm pretty frugal, I have to say. So but this also means that you still have to pay your bills, though, people. It doesn't mean that you can't, all of a sudden, I don't really feel like paying that. So Manisha said it doesn't bring me joy, so I'm not going to pay my electric bill. but yeah.
Although and then what that leads you into are more questions about money, meaning, and life, right? The electric bill. That's like a perfect one.
But can I ask you, actually, can I go back, actually? Because I'll actually even bring my sister as an example. Lots of things bring her joy. This is the problem, right? So she overspends because, she loves that handbag. Whether or not she can afford it is a whole other question. But when she wants it, she wants it. And I feel like there's a lot of people out there, right? I'm hoping that COVID and, has brought certain things to the surface. Well, maybe it brings me joy, but I don't really need it. So there has to be some sort of barometer, no? In terms of how much joy and how much it costs and how much am I making? Or,
No, absolutely. And that's the second step that I find helpful is to give people a framework. A lot of us are rethinking what we're eating, how we're spending our time. And it's also a great time to think about what healthy spending looks like. And my favorite formula for healthy spending actually comes from a book that Elizabeth Warren wrote back in 1992 when she was still a bankruptcy law professor at Harvard. And what she observed was that families who were able to withstand life's speed bumps, this being a classic example of life speed bump, were families whose spending roughly looked like this. 50% of their take-home pay was going to essential needs, 30% to wants, and 20% to saving for the future. And when I say that to people, most of them want to either poke my eyes out or ask me what I'm smoking, because they're like, save 20% for the future. The idea behind that is that part of it would be for near-term emergency funds, helping you build up, that over-quoted 3 to 6 month emergency fund, but it's actually really excellent advice. And then the remainder is saving for your retirement. And her justification for that was spot on, which is we are the first generations of humans that could literally live as long in retirement as we did while we were working. My dad retired at 52, and he's going to be 81 this year. And so that's a lot of retirement to be funding. And so the numbers work if you're saving 20% and investing it wisely, but a lot of people aren't. And they're saving much closer to 1, 2, 3%. So you're not going to jump suddenly to 20% overnight. But this combination of using joy-based spending as an approach, or meaning values-based spending to look at how you're spending your money, combined with this framework that is kind of tough love, 50, 30, 20. And you don't just get to put, if your mortgage is, it's a need, but you don't need to have a media room. You don't need to have an extra guest bedroom. There's a lot of stuff you don't need that we've now come to believe we need. And it's the same thing with food. Like, we need food, housing, transportation, medical care. But the definitions of those, we need to, part of them go into wants, which is that 30% category. And so using this time to really redefine what 50, 30, 20 could look like on a sustainable basis going forward when we get out of COVID, that's another really powerful example of the intersection between what matters and what you can control. And that it also addresses or purses.
No, that's awesome. And I think that that's a very simple formula, 50, 30, 20, that you can remember also, right? It's just making sure that you don't think it's, 50% want and then 30% essential. It's like, what did she say again? But yeah, but I think what you bring up a really great point in terms of what's a want and what's an essential, because you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people would say my big house is essential, even though I don't use a third of it or whatever. So if somebody is living beyond their means, mm-hmm. Are there any kind of practical markers first to let them know that they're spending beyond their needs? Because I actually feel like a lot of people who don't even know that they are. Like, are there formulas, right?
Well, the simplest one, and this is the harshest one, so I just want to say, like, this is my raw, organic, vegan, like, if you want to go, using food analogies. The harshest and strongest definition is if you're not saving 20% of your money, and the only debt you have is a mortgage, then you're living beyond your, and if you're in a city where you need cars to get around, a car loan, or car payment, if you're not saving 20%, then you're living beyond your means, because in modern times, means, especially for us women, means making sure that for each year that we're living and earning today, we're setting aside enough that it can grow and compound and sustain us in the out years. So if your savings rate is low, that is one very clear definition that you're not living within your means. And a lot of people don't realize that, because they might think, well, I don't have that much credit card debt. I'm pretty much living within my means. But they're not maxing out their 401ks. They're not maxing out their IRAs. So that's the single biggest test. The other test is any kind of credit card debt, high interest rate student loan debt, that you're still paying off, which would typically be private student loan debt. that isn't quite so much living beyond your means. It's just that trying to do the right thing for your education and your career has now bit you in the tushy, and you're lugging that debt with you. So that's another sign that it's not that you're not living within your means, it's that you have to adjust your means and pull back on some stuff in order for the pie to work, given the student loans. And the other thing I'd like to emphasize is that it's 50-30-20 is a starting place, but you get to pick. The only one that's fixed is 20%. That's the magic number of saving for the future. But if you live on the East Coast, or the West Coast, where I am out here in Portland, Oregon, it's expensive. So if I want to live in a certain kind of place, then my housing costs will go up, and therefore something else has to go down. And that's the piece that I find people unwilling to make the trade-off on, is to recognize at the end of the day, all of us have a take-home pie that's 100%. And no matter how we slice it, it's 100%. So you make one slice smaller or one slice bigger, the other slice needs to get smaller.
Well, I think some people's pie is really small right now.
Yeah.
So I guess, so say you've been laid off or furloughed or whatever right now, which there are millions of us who are, and you don't have any savings. How many?
38 million people
yeah. That's a lot of people.
have signed up for unemployment, and that does not include people who have just had hours reduced.
Yeah, yeah. And people who have not even signed up for unemployment.
Right.
So, yeah. So the number, of course, is much, much higher than that. And that's globally, right?
No, that's the U.S. number. U.S. Is that not horrifying?
I'm like, yeah, I can't think about it too much. It gives me too much stress. But I mean, we're in a very fortunate position because we're just like, we save all the time. Right. That's because we've lived the life of an artist and we just never wanted to be in debt. And that was our philosophy, 25, 30 years ago. But for those people who are not in that same position, who are now taking loans just to live, I mean, how do you feel about loans and taking money out?
So part of this comes from my immigrant background. And part of this comes from my financial training. But I have this belief, I literally hyperventilate when I have debt. Like I can't breathe. And, I like to say debt is a 4-letter word. And there are times when 4-letter words are, used with good reason. And there are times when debt is used with good reason. Like very few people can go out and buy a house for cash. Early on in your career, very few people, even if it's a beat up clunker, can go out and buy their first car for cash to get to work. So there are times where borrowing money makes absolute sense. Then there are emergencies, like what many people are going through right now, where you have no other option. Right. And if that's the case, you've got to do what you've got to do. But the thing that I just remind people is to be really, really diligent and ask yourself, if you had to pay twice as much for this item, would you still be using debt to buy it? Because if your debt has a mid-teens interest rate and you just make minimum monthly payment, basically it's going to cost you, I'm round, but almost twice as much. So then that can really bring you home. You may need to be borrowing money to pay rent or to pay for food or to pay for other things, but it keeps things, the handbag, from slipping in because you wouldn't pay twice for that.
Right. No, that's a really good point. And that's a really good way to, to ask yourself before you go and hit the pay now button or whatever. We do have a question. So with this 50-30-20 approach, is there a way to calculate what the ideal amount to retire with is?
So this is another. I wish there were a super simple rule of thumb. The rules of thumb I've seen out there, anywhere from don't retire until you have at least 6 times your annual expenses saved, Two, and I kid you not, don't retire until you have 25 times your annual living expenses paid. So the the range of estimates that's out there is ginormous. The tool that I like the best is something, if you Google the ballpark estimator, it's put out by a government entity that still exists, thank the Lord. This particular department hasn't been shut down yet. And it's called choosetosave.org. And at the ballpark estimator page, it takes about 20 minutes, and you input a lot of different information, and it will give you a pretty darn good estimate of what your number is. But just conceptually speaking, the way you want to think about it is, if you were, I'm just going to use round numbers, if you and your household spend $100,000 a year, and both you and your spouse have put in a full 35 years working, each of you, so you're going to get the maximum amount of Social Security for both of you. I'm rounding again, but that will likely bring in around $20,000 for each of you. So now you've got $100,000, $40,000 of that is covered. And in theory, of that $100,000, $20,000 of that was money for the future. That was the 20% you're saving for your future. So you don't need that anymore. So now we're down to, you just need enough in investments to cover that $40,000. So we went from $100,000, we subtracted out $40,000 for Social Security, and then we eliminated $20,000 that you were spending, because that was what was going to your savings. You're left with $40,000. The very, very rough rule of thumb is every $1 million in savings can safely generate a withdrawal rate of $40,000 a year. So in that scenario, you need $1 million to retire. Now, a couple of things. In previous generations, almost nobody went into retirement with a mortgage on their home, because they bought a home and then they lived in it for 30 years. So by the time they retired, they paid off the 30-year mortgage. We're in a very different situation now. So a key thing is, I tell people to be really careful about, don't aim to head into retirement with a mortgage or any debt. And that will also help lower your numbers. But the ballpark estimator will give you a much more custom number. And then there's another book that I like to recommend. I will rarely tell you that I feel strongly you should spend money. But to answer your question about retirement rules, there's a little book. It's $12 on Amazon. It's written by an accountant in shockingly straightforward, simple English, less than 100 pages, no jargon. And it's called Can I Retire? And it is the single best book. The author's Michael Piper. It's the single best book I have ever seen in 25 years that explains exactly how you answer that question, how you arrive at your number. So between Ballpark Estimator online and the 20 minutes it'll take to do that, and then maybe 3 hours, 4 hours max it'll take you to really read, think through Michael's book, Can I Retire? And you'll have your number.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. We'll put all the suggestions that you're bringing up in the description section below. And you're absolutely 100% right. My in-laws also, they retired at 55 and they're almost 80 and they're going strong, right? So it's true that we could be in retirement. We could be in retirement for a very long time. And so how do we manage that financially? But we're also trying to get over this hump so that, this year to 2 years, we can get through this and not be in a worse position. That's what I'm trying to hope for people, right? So that we're not borrowing more, we're not spending more just to get through. And then when we're out of it and we finally have our solid jobs back, we're so drowning in debt that it's almost hard to recover from. Right.
And it's like, medical adage, first do no harm. And so that's the first thing, like the most harmful thing you can do. I would call it the financial version of injecting Clorox into your veins to try and prevent COVID, is taking on unnecessary debt. So many of us are going to have to take on debt, necessary debt, to meet absolutely essential spending commitments. Could be health related, could be housing related, could be food and insurance related. But do not take on any debt that you don't absolutely have to take on. And that's such a slippery slope, right? It's like I'm trying not to eat so much ice cream these days. And so I'm trying to limit myself to 4 ounces a day, which tells you something about how much I used to eat a day. And then sometimes I'll be like, well, just have another spoon. And then that slippery slope never ends well for the pint. And so there's something about having, not allowing yourself to like trickle out of those edges with the debt, because sometimes it can just feel like, what the hell's an extra couple $100 on something that'll bring me joy in this crappy period, and stick it on the credit card with the essential stuff.
Right.
That's why I like to use that. Would you pay twice that amount? You need it that badly? Right.
No, that's awesome. I think that we all need a little tough love and different checks, right? Checkpoints. Because, the ice cream sitting in the freezer definitely looks really good right now, We've all been there. Who's kidding who? So how do we, is there things, there's certain things that we can do, but in terms of like mindset and stuff around there, is there like healthier mindsets that we can have? I feel like there's also like a lot of anxiety around, like, I don't know what's going to happen. I just don't know what's going to happen. And so either they spend a lot or, they don't make sound decisions. I don't know. Do you ever talk to people about, how to plan like you give all these great tips in terms of planning. Do you find that reduces the anxiety for people?
It really depends. I meet people who have a ton of money, nothing mathematically to worry about, and they are incredibly anxious. And then I meet sometimes people who have every reason to be worried about their finances, and they're like happy as can be. So, the anxiety around finances does not always, in fact, frequently does not correlate to your actual financial situation. And so one of the things that I have found is in periods of crises, it can be a really great time to reassess your thoughts around money and the meaning you want it to have in your life. And so I've been thinking about it a little bit and writing about it a little bit in terms of financial spirit animals. So the way I see it is all of us have two birds inside of us. One is an ostrich, and every one of us, me included, there are parts of my finances like I don't want to deal with. My head is in the sand. I really don't want to think about it. And then we all have a little peacock in us too. That there are times when we want to, show off our pretty feathers. But the goal that I think we're all aspiring to is to be like the bald eagle, to be like soaring free, the ability to see things from above and not be encumbered. And I think it's a really good time to identify where are your ostrich areas, where are your peacock areas, so that when this passes, you have less baggage holding you back from that kind of a standpoint. And two books that I recommend, and Risa, I think these will be new recommendations for you. I didn't mention them in any of our previous conversations. One is a book by Lynn Twist, Lynne Twist, and it's called The Soul of Money. And then the other one is one of my all-time favorite books written by Vicki Robin, and it's called Your Money or Your Life. And I find those two deeply profound books to help you think about what role you want stuff and money to play in your life. Because it's different for everyone, and these crises can be great opportunities for us to try on a 180 in terms of a new viewpoint.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
So your money or your life, are these both kind of, in terms of the topic, it's in terms of how to look at money, how to have your attitude towards money?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little about Your Money or Your Life, because that's the book that's had the single biggest impact of any book I've ever read.
Wow.
On my life. I read it in 1992 when it first came out, and I had just graduated from college that year, and the underlying premise that Vicki and her now deceased co-author Joe Dominguez were trying to make was that money is a current, it's a flow of energy. We get money into our lives because either we or loved ones in our household are doing some work, and in exchange for that work, they get money. So when we or our loved ones go back out into the world and we spend that money, quite literally, what we are doing is spending that life energy. And so that's what money is. It's a distribution of life energy. And thinking about how you want to spend it isn't about being in a straitjacket or depriving yourself. It's just about honoring where you want to put that money. And not right or wrong answers to that, but that framework can really help. And Vicki has a number of other frameworks in there as well, but that's the one that really, really struck me. And then there are also some sub-tools in there that are super useful. So the average American works about 2,000 hours a year. When you include all of the, work-related commuting and everything, it's roughly 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year. So if you are making $50,000 a year after tax, and you divide that by 2,000 hours, or what you come to is an hourly wage in a sense, and that means you're making $25 an hour. And so now if you see something and it costs $100 and you're like, I have to have this, you can say, ooh, that's 4 hours of my life energy. Is it worth it or not? And so using the ruler of your life's energy as the rubric against which to decide to make decisions rather than some kind of external societal judgment. So that's what Vicki talks about. And Lynn's book is also goes much more into what I would call your philanthropic, the philanthropic strategy or mindset that you want to have. And there's so many ways to give back in the world. It can just be, I don't want to say just be, some of the most powerful kinds of philanthropic activities are mentoring the next generation. So it doesn't always have to be monetary gifts, but she talks a lot about the soul of money and from that kind of standpoint.
That's awesome. So at what point do you feel like someone should seek a financial advisor?
Ooh, so
I know I'm pivoting a bit, but
yeah, no, I'm just sighing because you would think that's such an easy question, like at what point do you go to the dentist?
Yeah.
But it's not. It's you go to the dentist when you have teeth. You don't necessarily go to the financial advisor just because you have money.
Right.
And so what I would say is there's two camps of folks. People who just like to do it themselves and never need to go see an advisor. There's a very small percentage of people. And then people who don't enjoy dealing with their money or just want a second opinion on it. That's the vast majority of people. Now we come to the real problem, which is where do the vast majority of people go to get help? A little known fact about the financial services industry, and let me just backtrack. One thing many people tell me is the thing they hate most about seeking financial advice is it feels like they're shopping for a used car. Like the pricing is opaque and the whole experience just feels slimy. And the reason for that is that in the financial services industry, there are two legal standards to which financial companies can adhere to. So there's one legal structure under which financial services companies can build out their businesses, and that's called suitability. And the other legal structure they can set up under is called fiduciary. And those two words may sound like blah, 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 but they're huge, the difference. An advisor who operates under the suitability standard has the legal right to put the interest of themselves and their firm ahead of you, so long as what they advise is suitable. So, for instance, if there's an allergy drug that works, that's made by pharma company A, that works really well with your body composition, you go into the doctor, they give you a prescription for company B's allergy medication, and it's suitable, it's an allergy medicine, but they don't even have to tell you if, for instance, the reason they're writing that is because they get bonus points for office renovations every time they write a new script for that company's line of products. And so that's what's happening under suitability. There are some good advisors. I have some good friends that work for firms with suitability who really do try and do the right things for their clients. But the pressure under the suitability structure to do what's best for your firm ahead of your client, and the ability to do what's best for yourself above your client, that's like the hand in the cookie jar, makes that experience, which is about 80% of financial advisory experiences out there, feel disgusting. The other type is fiduciary, and under a company that's set up under the fiduciary standard has a legal obligation to put the interest of the client ahead of the advisor and the advisor's firm.
This is all public information, though, right? That it's suitable or it's a fiduciary corporation. So you would know that beforehand.
Well, only if you ask.
Oh.
I mean, no one puts up a sign, a big, huge neon sign out front and says, our company operates under the suitability standard. Can't like screw you. So if you ask, I mean, it's in the disclosure documents. So it's in there, but the disclosure documents are like the drug disclosures, like you need 3 layers of reading glasses to see the fine print. But if you ask an advisor to operate under suitability or fiduciary, they have to answer truthfully. So when you want to get financial advice, this is my long-winded way of saying the number one most important question to ask is, do you operate under the fiduciary standard? And only work with an advisor who does. Now, it used to be you could only work with an advisor if you had $1 million or more. But increasingly, there are a wide range of options for people who are not in that group. So, for instance, I am about to retire, but the firm that I'm about to retire from has been experimenting with what I personally think, and I have no financial incentive for saying this, is the best financial planning offering I've seen for somebody with $100,000 up to $1 million that needs financial advice and guidance at a reasonable rate. And then between the $0 to $100,000, I really like the offerings at Betterment. And for women in particular, I like the offerings at Ellevest. Those are both two companies that are relying very heavily on technology in order to provide financial advice for you using a fiduciary standard at a lower rate. And the two other things that I would say about getting financial advice is every decent financial advisor will welcome the question, what are your fees? And people tell me over and over again, and it's kind of funny because advice on our money is the product we're talking about, that they feel awkward about asking what the fees are. And all good advisors will welcome that question because it's a conversation for them to explain, A, what they are, and B, what value you get in exchange for them. And so if somebody is not willing to have that conversation with you right off the bat, then that's an immediate sign. So check out openplan.us, Ellevest, ELLEVEST.com, and Betterment.com are 3 great options if you're at the under $1 million level, and above $1 million, everybody wants to manage your money.
I bet. So we have another question. So where best to invest your money in the future, in the given future economic and market uncertainties?
Well, I have absolute certainty that no one can answer that question. So,
Right.
what do you do, right? So I'll tell you what I personally have done. I am actually officially retiring from the corporate world on May 31st.
Is that true?
Perfect. Yes, right in
You're
the
not
middle
even
of COVID.
50.
Well, I wanted, for my 50th birthday, that's what I gave myself, was
That's an amazing gift. Wow.
early retirement. So I
Congratulations.
have a lot of energy, so I don't think I'm going to just sit around.
Oh,
but,
no, I have a feeling you are not.
But what I have done with my money that I am now going to be living on in retirement is I'm using target date retirement funds from Vanguard. And increasingly, I'm seeing a lot of financial advisors guide their clients in this direction. So rather than saying like, and I used to do this in my old life, and I just don't believe it works anymore. Like, I want to own airplane stocks, but I don't want to own hotel stocks because I think eventually we're going to have air travel, and they're so cheap right now. But hotels, not so sure that's coming back. Or, there are these bets that you can make on individual sectors, individual companies, individual countries that are all based on broader themes. And that's how so many of us were taught to invest, like find something you know. That was a long truism. Invest in things you know. I espouse owning index funds, which are basically owning everything. Since you don't know what's going to go pop up, own a bite of it all. And so the way I like to explain it is it's like driving down a freeway. There are two different ways to drive. You can drive in the left lane, weaving in and out of traffic, trying to get that incremental advantage. Or you can drive in the right lane. Maybe you got your seatbelt on and you're listening to a podcast. And what happens is inevitably there's a traffic jam and both cars get to it at the same time. But the driver in the left lane has sweaty armpits and palpitating heart rate, and the driver in the right lane is calm, cool, collected. And in investing, driving in the left lane is analogous to what's called active investing. And that's trying to figure out what's the best place to invest going forward. What sectors, what countries, what stocks should we own? Driving in the right lane is analogous to a type of investing that's called indexing, or sometimes called evidence-based investing, which basically says nobody knows. So we're going to own a bit of everything. And owning a bit of everything is what's called pure indexing. And then there's a tweak on pure indexing, which is some folks will say, well, wait a minute. We know every Monday through Friday that this factory lets out. I mean, that's a fact, and there's always a backup traffic jam. So why wouldn't we use our GPS to go around it? That's evidence-based investing. So you're not making a bet on something. You're looking at a factual trend with some proof and saying, let me go around it. And so investors who do that tend to have slightly higher percentages of their portfolio in developing countries, small companies, and what are called value companies. But bottom line, think left lane, right lane. Almost everything you hear about on TV is how to invest in the left lane. Most of the long-term wealth is created by driving in the right lane, and you don't hear about it because it's boring.
Right. I was just going to say it doesn't make good TV ratings.
Right.
It's much better to like throw stuff at the screen and yell and take slam down the phone and yeah. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So we're going to wrap this up now. If anybody has any final questions, feel free to ask. But I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to share with people as we kind of, we're certainly not through this, but I feel like we've gone through one wave of it, and the fact that we feel like this is it's not a new normal, but we've shifted. It's a new something, right? And it's for us to decide. So as we kind of enter this new phase, is there any advice that you would give as a parting thought?
Yeah, I think this is the best time ever to give you and or your household a financial cleanse, and literally start from the top down. Like, what you're thinking about the role money should play in your life. As an example, I'm not proud of this, but for a huge chunk of my life, my self-worth was defined by my net worth. And I don't want to be that kind of human anymore. Other people may still want to be. I just don't. And so starting from there on down and really trying to get into a place where you feel extremely comfortable with how you are, the relationship that you have to money. And when it comes to the technical points of understanding money, there's a book called The Index Card by Helene Olin and Harold Pollack. And similar to Carl Richards, their philosophy is like, look, pretty much everything you need to know about managing your money, unless you have like $20-30 million plus, you can write it on an index card. And so they wrote a book with all the information on, essentially index card size chunks. And if you read that book, a lot of people feel like money has to be hard or complicated, but I guarantee you, if you read that book, you will know as much as or more than 95% of people who literally, and I'm not joking about this, work on Wall Street.
Wow. Yeah, no, very true. Manisha, thank you so much. People go to moneyzen.com and sign up for her monthly newsletter. It's monthly, correct?
Monthly-ish, but now that I'm into retirement, I should be able to stick to monthly.
Exactly. And any of your social media handles that you want to share?
Yeah, I'm /Manisha Thakor at everything. MANISHATHAKOR. I know it's a mouthful. You can link to everything off my moneyzen.com website. But I'm that handle on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all the usual suspects.
All the usual suspects. Thank you so much, Manisha. It was great.
Risa, thank you so